The Tippmann Model 98 tournament gun and the rugged Pro Carbine are the latest additions to the Tippmann semi-automatic gun line. The Tippmann name has always been synonymous with quality and innovation in the paintball industry. This video will cover the maintenance and repair of the Model 98 and Pro Carbine, as well as a complete demonstration of the teardown and assembly of the guns. Troubleshooting techniques and optional installations of the vertical adapter and expansion chamber will also be included in this video. Let's get started by taking a closer look at how the Model 98 and Pro Carbine operate. The Model 98 and Pro Carbine are powered by CO2 or compressed air. The air source connects to the constant air adapter located here. When you pull the trigger, it lifts up the sear to release the bolt. The spring tension pushes the bolt forward at the same time it's connected to the front bolt using this linkage arm. The paintball is pushed into the barrel. The O-ring around the front bolt makes a complete seal to the barrel. When the bolt moves forward, it strikes the valve pin. The valve opens. Air is passed around the valve, corralled through the power tube and front bolt, and into the barrel, where it pushes the ball out. There is a hole in the back of the valve that is oversized from the actual pin. The overflow of the air creates pressure between the two rear O-rings, pushing the bolt all the way back. When the bolt starts forward, the sear will catch it, and the gun is ready for the next shot. For the breakdown and repair of the Model 98 and Pro Carbine, you will need a few tools: a vise, an adjustable wrench, a 7/16 inch, a 5/8 inch, 1/2 inch wrench, a few Allen wrenches, including a 5/64 inch, 3/32 inch, 1/8 inch, 5/32 inch, and a 3/16 inch. You will also need a small screwdriver, an O-ring pick, snap ring pliers, wire cutters, needle nose pliers, a rubber mallet, Hops No. 9 gun oil, red and blue Loctite, and a shop towel.
Hello, my name is Jake Runyon. I'm a service technician for Tippmann Pneumatics. In this portion of the video, we'll be going through the complete breakdown of the Tippmann Model 98. The first thing you need to do is to remove the barrel by unscrewing it. Then you remove the feeder elbow. All you have to do to remove the feeder elbow is push down on the front sight to release it, and then you slide it straight off the back. Next, you'll want to remove the rear sight assembly. For that, you'll need a small screwdriver. And there is a tiny clip on the inside against this bolt. All you need to do is take the screwdriver and pop that off. You want to make sure you don't lose that. It's a pretty small part. Next, unthread the bolt. And you can remove the rear sight assembly. Now you're going to want to remove the tank adapter screws. For that, you'll need a 1/8 Allen wrench, Now you'll need to remove the two grip screws to hold the grip in place. You'll need a 5/64 Allen wrench, can now flip the grip aside so that it's out of your way for the rest of the breakdown. Now you'll need to remove the 6 receiver connecting bolts using your 1/8 Allen wrench. Slide the front grip out. Now you're ready to take off the top half of the receiver. When you do this, be careful so that your parts don't fly out. Your safety is inside the left grip. Make sure that moves, and you can just set that aside. Now you want to start by removing the small parts and make sure you don't lose them. Move the front sight pin, and the small sight spring. Remove the ball latch. Next, remove the end cap, the drive spring, pin, and the grommet. You can remove the linkage arm. Remove the front bolt. You can remove the rear bolt. The rear bolt has 3 parts to it: bolt handle, the bolt insert, and the bolt itself. You can now remove the tank adapter nuts. Now you can remove the trigger and the sear just by sliding them off the pins and removing the springs. Now you're ready to remove the valve assembly. For this, you'll need a 1/8 Allen wrench and remove the 2 screws on the back side of the gun. And this completes the breakdown of the Tippmann Model 98.
This procedure is not recommended for routine maintenance. However, if it is necessary, this section gives you an extensive breakdown and reassemble.
For the valve breakdown, you'll need to use a vise. It's always a good idea to place a shop towel over the jaws of the vise so you don't damage the part you're working on. Tighten the valve assembly down into the vise. Remove the gas line with a 7/16 wrench. Now you can remove the valve from the power tube. The best way to do that is to back out the velocity screw a little bit and push the valve out the back. Now we're ready for the breakdown of the valve. To remove the valve internals, you need to remove the snap ring that holds them in place. To do this, you need a little pick to work out the snap ring and a tool to relieve the pressure on the plunger. Once that's removed, you can then take the internals out by putting some tension on the pin. The parts will come right out. There's a brass seal inside the valve that doesn't really need to come out. If your valve is leaking, you may have a chip on the seat of the pin. If so, just wipe it off. A lot of times that'll solve your leak. Now to reassemble the valve, place the pin in first, then put the spring in and the plunger behind it. Now you need to reinstall the snap ring. Do this by setting it in the valve body and working it back into the groove just like you took it out. Place the valve back into the power tube. line up the two holes. Did you get the gas line back in there? Place it back in the vise. You'll need to use some sealant on the threads of the gas line. We use red Loctite. Put it on the threads and wipe off any extra. Thread the gas line back into the valve. And tighten it with your 7/16 wrench. Imagine that the valve is in the gun. You want the tank adapter to line up with where the tank adapter bolts would go through. This completes the valve breakdown and reassembly. For the reassembly of the Model 98, the first thing you want to do is to reinstall the valve assembly. Use a little bit of red Loctite in the valve screw holes to keep the valve screws from backing out. Install the two valve screws using your 1/8 Allen wrench. Next thing you want to do is to reinstall the trigger. Place it on the two pins. Reattach the spring. Reinstall the sear. The bottom half of the sear will sit in between the two guide pins to limit the travel. Reattach the spring. Next you want to reinstall the rear bolt. Reinstall the front bolt by sliding over the power tube. Connect the two bolts by the linkage arm. Place the linkage arm in the holes, front bolt and the rear bolt. Push it down. Next, reinstall the drive spring. Turn the bolt handle until the drive spring goes through. Reinstall the grommet. The grommet is a piece that can wear out. If it's worn, you'll need to replace it. Reinstall the end cap. You can now put in the two tank adapter nuts. For the front sight, place the sight pin in first and set the sight spring down into the indentation in the receiver. The front sight has two holes in it, a larger hole and a smaller hole. The large hole will go over top of the pin. The small hole will catch on the spring. Push the sight in and down. It will hold into place until the gun is together. Reinstall the ball latch, making sure that the open side faces towards the barrel. Now take the left half of the receiver, line the safety up with the hole in the bottom receiver. Push the two together. Reinstall the front grip. And retighten all the screws. Now you want to reattach the grip by using the two screws that hold the grip in place. It's a 5/64 Allen wrench. Now you need to reattach the tank adapter using 1/8 Allen wrench and the 2 screws. Now we'll reinstall the rear sight. Place the rear sight into the receivers. Put the bolt through the right half and thread it in to the sight. There's a small notch on the back end of this bolt for the little C-clip to go through. Find the notch with the clip, push it on with your finger. Check the bolt to make sure that it turns. Now you can reinstall the feeder elbow, push it on to the receiver, move it up until it latches in place, rethread the barrel, and that completes the reassembly of the Model 98. Now you can go out and shoot your gun.
Aftermarket external or cosmetic parts should not hinder the performance of the Model 98. However, use caution when installing internal upgrades. Some aftermarket parts can hinder the performance of the gun.
For this section of the troubleshooting, we'll be covering auto firing for the Model 98. Auto firing is when the rear bolt does not catch the sear after each shot. The first thing that would be causing this would be a dirty gun. You can check this by releasing the feeder elbow, sliding the bolts forward. If this front bolt is dirty, you can douse it in a solution of alcohol and water. Wipe off any extra, and then you could shoot the gun dry. The next thing that could cause this would be if you're using the wrong oil or bad oil. We recommend using Hops 9 gun oil. If you're not using that, you may need to break down the gun and clean all the bad oil off. The next thing that could cause this would be a worn or a missing rear bolt O-ring. Check this. If it's worn or missing, you need to replace it. The last thing that could cause this would be a worn rear bolt. Check the slot to make sure that there are no burrs on the bolt. If there are, it'll need to be replaced. Also check the leading edge of the sear. Make sure that it's nice and square. If there's any burrs on that, that will also need to be replaced. And that concludes the auto firing section of the troubleshooting. In this section of troubleshooting, we'll be going over ball breakage. Ball breakage is when a paintball will break before it leaves the gun. The most common thing that would cause this problem would be a missing ball latch. I'm now going to show you how to install ball latch while the gun is already assembled. Drop the ball latch in place so that the open side is towards the barrel. Work it into the slot with a pick or a small Allen wrench. And then push it in place. The next thing that could cause this is if you already had some broken paint on the front bolt or in the barrel. If you do, just spray off the front bolt, clean the barrel, wipe it off, and shoot it dry. The third thing that can cause this would be a burr or a nick in the barrel, or if you had a dent in the end of the barrel like this. And this concludes the ball breaking section of troubleshooting. On this section of troubleshooting, I'll tell you how to fix your gun if it won't chronograph low enough or if it's bad on gas efficiency. Usually the problem is due to the drive spring being too stiff. Easy way to fix this is to take and cut 2 to 3 coils off of the front end. Then replace it into the gun. If this doesn't solve your problem, try 1 coil at a time until it takes care of it. Another thing that can cause this problem is if you're using a siphon tank. You want to make sure you're not using a siphon tank and that your tank's not too full. That concludes this section of the troubleshooting. During this section of the video, I will show you how to install a vertical adapter and expansion chamber. You need to remove the valve assembly from the gun, place it in a vise, remove the gas line with a 7/16 wrench. You can set this aside. Now be sure to check the threading in the valve. Be sure there's no extra sealant in it. If there is, just wipe it out. Now inspect the vertical adapter to be sure that it fits in the gun. This one doesn't fit. It may have been damaged in shipping. You want to make sure it fits in the slot and sits down nice and smooth. Now you'll want to install this into the valve, apply some sealant to the threads, wipe off any extra, start it into the valve, place it in the vise, take it in about 2 more turns. Now place the assembly into the gun, making sure it sits down nice and even. Replace the 2 screws on the back side of the valve with the 1/8 Allen wrench. Now continue to reassemble the gun as shown earlier in this video. To install the expansion chamber, first remove the gas line from the tank adapter. Hold it in the vise. With a 7/16 wrench, remove it. You don't need that anymore. Check the fitting to be sure there's no extra sealant in threads. Now you'll take the new gas line, add some sealant to the threads, spread it out, wipe off any extra. Go ahead and do this to both sides. Thread the gas line into the adapter nut. And tighten down the gas line. Next, place the expansion chamber into the vise. Thread the gas line into the expansion chamber and tighten up. making sure the tank adapter will go back on the gun when you install it. Next, you take the expansion chamber and screw it in to the vertical adapter you just installed. Now you'll attach the tank adapter with the two screws. Use your 1/8 Allen wrench. Now you'll reattach your feeder elbow and rethread your barrel. And that concludes the installation of the vertical adapter and expansion chamber.
This concludes our video on the Tippmann Model 98. If you have any further questions concerning your Model 98, please contact our technical support department at 800-533-4831. Now that you know how to service the Model 98, let's move on to the Pro Carbine.
In this section of the video, we'll be covering the breakdown of the Pro Carbine. The first thing you need to do is to remove the barrel pinch bolt with a 3/16 Allen wrench. When that's removed, unthread the barrel. Slide the forearm grip straight off. Now with the 1/8 Allen wrench, remove the two tank adapter screws. The ring that holds the sling in place will then come out. You set that aside. Next, with your 1/8 Allen wrench, remove the 4 connecting bolts for the lower receiver. Now you can remove the lower receiver. We'll go ahead and break down the lower receiver here. First thing you need to do, with a pair of snap ring pliers, remove the snap ring on the back side of the safety. Push the safety through. Now with the 5/64 Allen wrench, remove the 2 grip screws. Flip the grip around to the back side of the lower receiver. Now with your 1/8 Allen wrench, remove the 2 bolts holding the receiver together. You can lift off the top half. Make sure you know where the 2 tank adapter nuts are. They'll go back in the bottom half of the receiver. You can then remove the trigger and sear. The sear and the spring are one piece, so you don't have to worry about losing the spring. Now you just reattach the sear onto the pin, connect the spring. On the trigger, it's easiest if you connect the spring first, then pull the trigger up to the pins. Once they're in place, you can put the top half lower receiver back on. And refasten the bolts using the 1/8 Allen screw. Refasten the grip with the 2 screws. You set that aside. Next part you want to do is remove the gas line using a 7/16 wrench. Now you can remove the rear sight by sliding it forward. Remove the linkage arm. Now using a 3/16 Allen wrench, place it through the hole in the end cap. Twist the end cap off. You can remove the spring, the pin, the grommet. To remove the bolt handle, line the bolt handle up with the hole in the receiver. Pull it straight out. You can slide the valve or the rear bolt out the back. Now you can remove the valve. You can either tap it out or you can just follow it out through the grooves in the bottom of the receiver. Using a 3/16 Allen wrench, remove the velocity screw. This is what holds the power tube in place. Now you can tap the power tube out and the front bolt. Now you can remove the ball latch. To do this, you have to remove the ball latch screw with the 3/32 Allen wrench. Once that's out, tip the gun up. The ball latch, ball plate, and screw will fall out. This concludes the breakdown of the Pro Carbine.
This procedure is not recommended for routine maintenance. However, if it is necessary, this section gives you an extensive breakdown and reassemble.
For the valve teardown and reassembly, you'll need to use a vise. It's always a good idea to cover the jaws of the vise by using a shop towel. Place the valve into the vise, tighten it down. Now with an Allen wrench, relieve spring tension on the plunger. With an O-ring pick, work the snap ring out. With the snap ring out, you can remove all the internal parts of the valve. You do this by placing some tension on the pin, and all the pieces will come out the front. You should have the pin, the spring, and the plunger. There's a seat inside of the valve that doesn't really need to come out. Check the black plastic seal on the pin. If there's any metal chips on that, that could be causing a leak. Now you're ready to reinstall all the pieces of the valve. First, drop in the pin. Next, drop in the spring. Place the plunger in behind it. Now take your snap ring, hold it in, and work the snap ring back into the groove with your O-ring pick. With the snap ring back in, you can put your O-rings back onto the valve. Place the valve body O-ring on and the valve fitting O-ring on. This valve fitting O-ring causes the seal between the valve fitting and the valve. If this is damaged, you'll need to replace this. And that concludes the valve breakdown and reassembly for the Pro Carbine. During this section of the video, we'll be covering the reassembly of the Pro Carbine. First thing you want to do is to drop the ball latch in, open side facing towards the front of the gun. Install the ball latch plate, the 3/32 Allen wrench, install the screw. Now we can reinstall the power tube and front bolt. Make it so that the velocity screw hole is facing up so that you can put the velocity screw in when you get it in there. Drop it down and then square up the hole. You may need to push it in. Square up the hole and install the velocity screw and spring. Now we can install the valve. There's a small black O-ring on the valve seat. If this is damaged, you'll need to replace this. This can cause leaks. With that facing towards you and the pin facing towards the back, push the valve in until you can find it in the hole. Make sure you line it up so that when you put the fitting in, it makes a nice seat on that black O-ring. Next, now you'll screw in the gas line. And use a 7/16 wrench to tighten. Make sure that if the lower receiver was on, the tank adapter would still line up. Now you're going to want to insert the rear bolt. Slide the rear bolt in until the bolt handle hole and the hole in the receiver line up. Now you can place the bolt handle into the gun. Now you line up the front bolt so that the hole for the linkage arm is right on top. Drop the linkage arm into the hole in the front bolt, the hole in the rear bolt. Slide the rear sight on till you hear it click. Next we'll install the drive spring grommet and drive pin. Insert into the hole, turn the bolt handle until you feel it go through. Place the end cap on, screw it into place. Tighten it with a 3/16 Allen wrench through the hole. Now we can install the lower receiver. Slide the lower receiver on and attach it with the 4 grip bolts using a 1/8 Allen wrench. Next, you'll want to start to put in 2 tank adapter bolts. But you don't want to tighten them. Right now you'll want to install the front grip. Bring the ring, fit it into the 2 slots in the tank adapter, hold the tank adapter down, and finish turning in the screws. Once the 2 screws are installed, you thread in the barrel. You replace the barrel tightening bolt. And that concludes the reassembly of the Pro Carbine.
Aftermarket external or cosmetic parts should not hinder the performance of the Pro Carbine. However, use caution when installing internal upgrades. Some aftermarket parts can hinder the performance of the gun.
On this section of the troubleshooting, we'll be covering auto firing for the Pro Carbine. Auto firing is when the reel bolt does not catch the sear after each shot. First thing that can cause this would be a dirty gun. Check this, pushing the front grip forward, letting the bolt forward, taking a look at the front bolt. If you have any broken paint in there, you can just clean it by dousing it with your alcohol and water solution. Wipe it dry, then you can shoot it to get the rest of the water out. Slide the front grip back into position. The next thing that could cause this would be if you're using the wrong oil or the bad oil. We recommend using the Hops 9 gun oil. If you're not using that, you may need to break down the gun and clean it to get all of the wrong oil off there. Last thing that can cause this would be a worn or missing rear bolt O-ring. Check the O-ring. If it's worn or missing, you'll need to replace that. And that concludes the auto firing section of the troubleshooting. On this section of the troubleshooting, I'll tell you how to fix your gun if you have a valve leak. More than likely, the valve is not lined up correctly with the hole in the receiver. It has to be lined up so that when you put the fitting in, it makes a good seal on the black O-ring. Also, check that black O-ring and make sure it's not deteriorated. If it is, you'll need to replace it. The third thing that will cause it would be an internal valve leak. If that's the case, break down the valve and check the seat to make sure there's no metal chips. Put the valve back together and try it again. And that concludes this section of the troubleshooting. In this section of the troubleshooting, I will tell you how to fix your gun if the velocity is shooting too high. More than likely, the drive spring is too stiff. So remove the end cap, pull out the drive spring, clip off 2 or 3 coils. Now reinsert it into the gun. Tighten the end cap. More than likely that will solve your problem. If that doesn't solve your problem, take 1 coil off at a time until you get the right velocity. And that concludes this section of the troubleshooting. In this section of the troubleshooting, I'll tell you how to fix your gun if you're having trouble with your velocity screw falling out. First off, make sure that you're using the plastic velocity screw. We have some that are made out of metal. If you have one of those, contact us about getting it replaced with a plastic one. If you're still having trouble, try a little bit of blue Loctite on the threads. That will hold it in place better on the gun. And that concludes this section of the troubleshooting. On this section of the video, I'll show you how to install a vertical adapter and an expansion chamber on the Pro Carbine. First thing you need to do is to remove the gas line using a 7/16 wrench. Now take the vertical adapter block and make sure it fits onto the receiver. On this block, you'll need to install one of the black 90-degree elbows. Place some Loctite on the threads. Wipe off any extra. Turn it into the block. So that it faces towards the back of the gun. Now you'll need to install a brass plug on the back side of the block so that the air doesn't escape. Place a little Loctite on the threads. Wipe off the extra. With a 3/16 Allen wrench, insert the plug into the block. Now you'll need the reduction fitting. The reduction fitting will screw right into the valve. Take the other black 90-degree elbow, put some Loctite on the threads, wipe off the extra, screw that into the fitting. You need to tighten this so that it angles towards the front of the receiver slightly at an angle. Place the vertical block onto the receiver. Put the gas line between the two nuts on the 90-degree elbows and make any adjustments that you need to at this time. Push the block forward till the hole in the adapter and the hole in the receiver lines up. If you need to, you can tap this with a rubber mallet till it lines up. Now take the pin that came in your kit and put this through the hole on the block, through the hole in the receiver. Tap this into place. Now the block is secured to the receiver. Using a 5/8 wrench, tighten the gas line nuts. Now the vertical adapter is installed, and you need to reassemble the rest of the gun as shown earlier on this video. Now that the gun's reassembled, take the tank adapter and remove the gas line and the fitting using an adjustable wrench. You don't need this anymore. Check the threads, make sure they're pretty clean. Take one of these brass 90-degree elbows that came in your kit, put some Loctite on it, wipe off all the extra, and insert it into the tank adapter. Tighten it with the adjustable wrench. You want it so that it faces away from where the tank connects. Next, take your expansion chamber and with the other brass 90-degree elbow, put some Loctite on the threads, wipe off all the extra, and insert it into the expansion chamber. Now you'll want to look when the expansion chamber goes into the gun, the elbow needs to face back towards the back of the gun. You can now insert the expansion chamber into the vertical adapter. Place the tank adapter onto the grip. And with the two 1/8 Allen screws, just get them started into the grip. And you want to make it so these two brass elbows face each other, so make any adjustments you need to. Insert the plastic gas line that came with your kit. And tighten down with a 1/2-inch wrench. Now you want to install the front grip. And that concludes the installation of the expansion chamber and the vertical adapter.
This concludes our video on the Tippmann Pro Carbine. If you have any further questions concerning your Pro Carbine, please contact our technical support department at 800-533-4831. Have fun and play safe.